to attend this event. So I'd like to welcome you to the Global Virtual Roundtable event, titled The Changing Landscape of Entrepreneurship Across Borders, mainly looking at the Europe and the US.
Please put in the chat your name and the country and what you're doing. So we've got Erika welcoming us and joining from North Carolina on the East. And also, hi everyone. Hi Faiz, that her the system allows just now. All right, team in London. So welcome everyone.
That's Professor Ram is there, Sarima from London, quite a few people joining in. Great. So we'll move on, and what we're doing now, we're just trying to see how many people. So that's Johan from Geneva in Switzerland. That is Gretchen is here as well. Okay, Saba from London. Okay, quite a few people from London here at the moment. From Portugal, from the US, Southern Oregon. Nice. So quite a few people. We're seeing North Carolina there. Dr. Carbin, nice. So we're seeing quite a few people from different parts of the world join in, which is really lovely. Great. Yeah, we can see Seattle, Tacoma as well. Houston, Texas, nice. So we're just going to be rolling on with the activities for today. And first of all, we're going to start with the event moderators. The event will be moderated by myself, Winifred Soribe. I am a PhD candidate in entrepreneurial finance at the University of Bedfordshire in the UK. And next to me would be Dr. Mohammed Saudi, who is my PhD supervisor and would be my co-moderator for today. So I'd like to call on Dr. Mohammed Saudi to please introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. It is Mohammed Saudi. I am senior lecturer in accounting and finance and the head of Center for Contemporary Accounting, Finance, Economic Research at University of Bedfordshire. As Winifred said, I am the director of study and the main supervisor for Winifred PhD. My research area is all about financial entrepreneurship and sustainability and financial inclusion. I'm supervising 5 PhD students in these areas. So I am happy to be with you today to just facilitate the questions and to help in supporting Winifred on this event and all my team. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks for that, Dr. Mohammed. That was a nice introduction. We would now be moving over to the agenda today, just to let everyone know what we're going to be doing throughout. So we're going to start with the welcome and introductions we're doing already, and we are going to go through some housekeeping items. And then before we start the main discussion, we're going to finish it up with a Q&A with the speaker, and then would have some closing remarks. So going on, would like to thank all our partners and sponsors that have made this event possible. We start with the Business and Management Research Institute within the University of Bedfordshire, which is my own home university, and this is the institute funding my PhD. We move on now to NACCE, which is the National Association for Community College Entrepreneurship. NACCE has been amazing throughout this event. From the onset to where we are now, they've played a very significant role in making this event possible. So I would like to thank them as well. We move over to NACUE, which is the National Association for College and University Entrepreneurs, and they've played an amazing role as well. They've been there for all the meetings and all the planning, so thank you as well. William Factories, a small business incubator. This has been one of the incubators recommending panelists to us, and so we thank them as well. The London Business School, which is advancing entrepreneurship globally, and they've been here and supporting us throughout. NACCE as well, which is a platform for entrepreneurs to partner and collaborate on different projects. They've been one of the partners here, and I would strongly encourage you to please join if you can. Winifred Soribe Consult, which is my own website where I collect anonymous data for my PhD research, and Starter Hub, which is a UK platform providing educational materials for entrepreneurs. So thanks again to all our panelists, all our partners and sponsors. So moving on now, we will also be introducing the NACCE technical team. So this is made up of Natalia and Rika, and they have been super amazing throughout the planning of this event. I'd like to call on them, Natalia, first of all, to introduce herself, and then Erika.
Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us from so many different countries, but we are so happy that you join us. So my name is Natalia Berezhna, and I'm project manager for NACCE headquarters and also a podcast producer for Making Our Way Forward. With me today online, my colleague Erika Burfield. She is a project coordinator for operations at NACCE. If I flip to the next slide, you will see the array of participants who registered to this event. We've got representatives from 17 different countries coming from different backgrounds with educators, students, entrepreneurs, advisors, financial companies, startup firms, and so many more. And with that, I would like to introduce my colleague Erika Burfield, and she will go with you through some of the housekeeping items. Erika?
Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. So, attendees, you are in listen only mode, and so you cannot turn on your camera or unmute your microphone. Therefore, utilize the chat like you have been doing to engage in conversation with other attendees here. But then if you have questions, post them in the Q&A. You'll see that Q&A tab there in the menu bar. You can post those questions anonymously or with your name, thus giving us your consent that we mention your name when we ask the questions, and then use your question for possible social media promotion. With that, Natalia, I'll turn it back over to you.
So as Erika mentioned, like some additional item for us to remember is that this webinar is also interactive, and please respond to some speakers in the chat with your comments, stories, or links. And also please share your insights on Twitter using the special hashtag we created for this event, USA EU for eShip, and tag NACCE, NACUE, and University of Bedfordshire. With that, I'm going to give the floor back to Winifred, our moderator for today. Winifred?
All right, thanks for that, Natalia and Erika. So we are now going to introduce our panelists. As we all know, there's no roundtable discussion without panelists. So I'd like to invite our wonderful panelists to please introduce themselves briefly. So we start with Dr. Rebecca Kerbin, the President and CEO of NACCE in the US.
Well, hello everyone who's joining us from around the world. I'm so proud to be part of this event. I'm so grateful to my staff, to all of the esteemed leaders that are with us today. I have the honor of serving as President and CEO of the National Association for Community College Entrepreneurship. We call ourselves NACCE, and we are a robust network of 300 community colleges and a growing number of historically Black colleges and universities in the United States. In fact, our membership has grown over the past couple of years, actually to exceed over 330. So we have about 2,000 people that are engaged, and we impact about 3 million students. So our mission broadly is to encourage entrepreneurship in the classroom, and also to use it as a catalyst for economic development in communities. So I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to a very engaging conversation with all of you.
Great, thanks a lot for that nice introduction, Dr. Rebecca. We now move over to Timothy Baines, who is the Chair of Trustees of NACUE in the UK.
Yes, Winifred, thank you very much. As Winifred said, my name is Tim Barnes, and I am the chairman of NACUE, which is a charity that exists in the UK to promote entrepreneurship amongst students on campus. We're going for about 11 or 12 years now. We're represented in about 2/3 of all of the universities, the 200 or so universities in the UK. My background is pretty much as an entrepreneur. I started my first business when I was 14, learned that I don't really understand retail at all, and I should never be allowed anywhere near any kind of retail business. I'm a venture capital investor, or I have been, and I'm an angel investor today. I also teach entrepreneurship. Currently, I teach strategy for new entrepreneurial ventures at University College London. I've previously taught at Cambridge University and worked with Loughborough University in the UK, MIT in the US, and various other bits and pieces. And my particular focus and interest is on the kind of policies and support frameworks that need to exist to get the very best out of entrepreneurial talent. So how do you encourage entrepreneurship? How do you build the kind of networks and policies that enable it, that support increased levels of investment, that make people think, hey, a business is something I can start? And maybe some of that will come into our conversation today, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that nice introduction, Tim. We'll now move over to Mandy Sangera, who is a philanthropist and works very closely with UNESCO. Mandy, please.
Thank you very much, Winifred. It's a great honor and a great privilege to be amongst so many great entrepreneurs and great academics here today. I'm a global campaigner and actually have spent the last 30 odd years empowering women and making sure they have a seat at the table. And I'm very passionate about sending the elevator down and making sure that the next generation of entrepreneurs, get the skills, the mentorship, and actually about being, not just an ally, but actually also being a sponsor and making sure that we create real opportunities for the next generation and leave no one behind. And as we've come through the pandemic, we've seen a lot of young people being affected really not in a positive way. So I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Great. Thanks for that, Mandy. We now move over to Dr. Louisa Alemani. Dr. Louisa, please.
So, well, welcome everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, evening, depending where you are. So, Luisa Alemani here. I'm a professor in London Business School, where I teach entrepreneurial finance classes, so and entrepreneurship as well. I'm also the academic director of the Institute of Entrepreneurship and Private Capital, which is a newly created institute that is merging both the entrepreneurship part and the financing of these entrepreneurial ventures together. And before that, I've been teaching for many years in Spain, where I come from, in Barcelona, in the SADE Business School. And before academia, which has been almost 2 decades already, I was working in several places, but the most relevant probably was I was working in venture capital for some time. So I was on the practical side before becoming a person dedicated to the research of this topic. I do research on things related to financing, but lately I've been focusing on impact investing. So I'm very much on social entrepreneurship and its financing. And currently I'm also working on a project on how ESG can be applied to venture capital. So how venture capital is going to integrate ESG in as part of the equation, not only looking at the team and the market and the deal, but also the ESG factors. So I stop there. I'm happy to participate.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Louisa there. We'll now move over to Seven Jacobs, who is the founder and CEO of Starter Hub. Seven, please.
Hi there. Thank you very much, Winifred, and thank you so much for having me on here. I'm really, really excited to be and just honored to be in a room of so many kind of such experienced professionals. My name is Seven. I've coming at this from a little bit of the youth entrepreneurship perspective myself, seeing if I can use some of the stories or experiences I have to contribute to some of the questions we're answering today. I have previously, in the first business I ever worked on, was very lucky to work with some very big name clients, restaurant chain called Nando's, for those of you in the UK, as well as Nike, worldwide known brand, and a lot smaller organizations too. And it really threw me into the deep end of entrepreneurship and serving these clients. Since then, I've taken a very strong passion in social entrepreneurship, and I've helped or begun to found Starter Hub, which is an organization looking to provide resources to help level the playing field for new entrepreneurs getting into it and being interested in a career in entrepreneurship. So I'm excited to be here and share some of those insights with you all today.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Seven. We now move over to Johan Franzen, who is the CEO and founder of Entnest. Johan, please.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you for having me. It's really, really great to be here. As you see on the picture there, I have 2 flags. So I'm Swedish by birth, but living in Geneva, Switzerland since more than 20 years. I worked about 20 years in a quite large American multinational in the fast-moving consumer goods industry, managing strategic sourcing and product supply, both regionally and globally. But I left the corporate life in 2012 and have not looked back. I'm now fully an entrepreneur, and I consider myself an entrepreneurship mountain guide. It's all up and downs in the entrepreneurship world, that's for sure. So I'm the founder and CEO of NACCE. Ent is short for entrepreneurs, and Nest is like the home of entrepreneurs. And we aim to enable the creation of more successful entrepreneurs everywhere. I live by 3 quotes, basically. I definitely think that entrepreneurship is the future of work. Entrepreneurship is a contact sport. And I also very much believe in the fact that a rising tide will lift all the boats. So trust, productivity, and synergies are core elements to me and to NACCE in enabling more successful entrepreneurs everywhere. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Johan. So we can see the wealth of knowledge we have on our panelists right here today. And so after the introductions, we're going to dive into the deal of the day, which is the discussions we're all looking forward to. So we are starting with access to entrepreneurial finance. And with that, before we make a start, we're going to just quickly have a poll that asks which country ranks higher in access to entrepreneurial finance. So.
All right, so I'm going to end the poll, and Winifred, we are going to reveal the result.
Okay.
So as we see, like our participants believe that 62% that USA ranks higher in access to entrepreneurial finance, with UK to follow. Okay.
Okay. All right, great. I can see that now on my own screen. But the answer really is because we're basing our answers on the the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, and it ranks the UK as the highest country. So 45 countries were studied, and the UK came in 7th place as for access to entrepreneurial finance. So thanks to everyone that participated there. And I'll give the floor now to Dr. Mohammed Saudi to please start the first round of questioning.
Hello again, it is Mohammed Saudi from University of Bedfordshire. I have the pleasure to start the conversation by asking some questions about entrepreneurship. So the first question I'd like to ask all participants is about, do you think cultural differences between the US and Europe play an important role in accessing finance?
So that would be for our panelists. We start with Dr. Carvin, please.
Thank you very much for that good question. I have been thinking about finance and thinking about the differences between the UK and the United States. Full disclosure, I'm much more familiar with the data in the United States and some of the opportunities in the United States that our fellow panelists and maybe people who are tuning in may not know about. And what strikes me deeply about finance is that I think if finance is not front and central to the equation of entrepreneurs and my specific interest is on everyday, what we call in the United States, Main Street entrepreneurs. These might be people that are starting everyday businesses, a barbershop, a restaurant, things that keep local economies humming. And what we see through our network of community colleges is if there's not a deep understanding of finance, and it doesn't have to be a complicated one, you don't have to be an accountant or have an accounting degree, but you have to have tools and resources. And I wanted to share with everybody from my perspective as somebody who came up through an higher educational doctoral program, there was really no emphasis in my program, a very robust program on finance. And it wasn't until I left the higher ed community and took up the job as the president and CEO that I really had to learn a lot about finance very quickly, a balance sheet. So in some respects, wherever you are on the continuum in the United States, I think having more tools, as NACCE does through our partnership with Intuit that provides no-cost QuickBooks to aspiring entrepreneurs, that's really where the conversation begins. I think that's where we can make the greatest impact. So I'll leave my comments there and turn it back to you, Winifred.
We're going round all the panelists. So Tim, please, Can you share your thoughts on this?
So I think that the really key thing, and thank you, Winifred, if you look at data like the GEM report, is actually the difference between the UK and the US compared to the rest of the world is really not that great. If you are trying to start an early stage technology-based business, which is what most of us think, not the kind of businesses Rebecca was just thinking about, but the sort that are likely to attract VC funding, there's actually plenty around, right? The UK has about half of all of the available venture capital money for the entirety of Europe. The US is a pretty big market. When you look at comparable clusters, one of the great mistakes is to go, as we've kind of done in this question, UK versus US. UK is, it's a fifth the size, right? All our numbers are smaller. It's a smaller place. But when you look at you try and compare like for like, apples with apples, the UK or the southeast of the UK in particular, actually the better way of thinking about it is think about Silicon Valley, right? It'll take you 3 hours to cross Silicon Valley. 3 hours is most of the way across the UK, depending on where you start. So you can take a very large chunk of the country and compare it and come up with something that's more like for like. And if you do that, you'll find that for any kind of ambitious potential high growth company in a digital sphere or a biotech sphere, the amount of money you can access and what you can do is actually broadly similar. That's point one. Point two is where it's different, because it's not about is the money out there, or indeed can you reach the ventures. In fact, consistently for most of the last 20 years or so, you'll find about 1 in 20, around 5% of people with a broadly ambitious VC backable idea end up receiving some kind of funding. The percentage is about the same in the UK and the US. What happens that is different, and it gives a huge number of commentators the screaming heebie-jeebies because they can't interpret it, is the culture of the people is completely different. So your experience of going to see a VC in the US is you turn up and something along the lines, and I've done this on both sides of the Atlantic, and somewhere along the lines, some guy will go, hey, that's great. Do you know what, buddy? That's the best thing. I was about to attempt an American accent, didn't really quite come out, but I'm doing the American bit. This is one of the best things you've ever seen. This is incredible. It's wonderful. And you go through this really exciting, high vector, energetic conversation. And just as you're about to sign the deal, they go, oh, sorry, I forgot to ask this one thing. What about this? What about this? What about this? And you go through a very high energy trajectory, and then it slopes off. The experience in the UK is that you turn up and go, oh, it's rubbish. I've seen 5 of those this week, and frankly, I'm not interested. I mean, I might be interested if you've kind of done this. Oh, you have done that. Oh, well, I'm probably still not interested. And you go through a much lower perspective. And this is characterized by an approach of culture. You have a US form of irrational exuberance versus a UK form of undue pessimism, but you get to the same place. And what this is really about is saying that the predominant differences are cultural, they are linguistic, they are to do with the kind of strengths that individual ecosystems have. But wherever you are from, you're usually best off trying to raise money there, because all of the things you never account for that you're going to find useful, who you went to university with, who you grew up with, where you can draw your resources from, are consistently underrated by entrepreneurs in the long-term story of their success. So the money is the same, the experience is not. Between those two markets. And the final thing, the third thing, is that having got the money, what then happens to you is different. So if you took your first round of VC money in any particular year in the first decade of this century, which gives us an ability to look back, because by the time you've left, it's going to be at least 5 or 10 years out, left that business, you are more likely to have IPO'd if you took your first money in Europe, about 3 times more likely. But you are 20 times more likely to have sold out to a corporate if you took your money in the US. And actually, the real difference is about what drives the difference in the market is not where you take your money, it's how you exit. Exits are poorer across Europe and in the way they work. You're much more likely to sell to somebody from overseas, and large corporates behave very differently around startups. So they don't invest in the same things. They don't buy companies in the same way, which is why many of our stars in the UK amongst digital companies have been bought by US or other overseas buyers. And you'll see that pattern across Europe. So where do you want to start as an entrepreneur? Doesn't make much difference. Do contend with the contextual differences and cultural differences, but ultimately you're going to look for your exits in different places.
All right, fantastic. Thanks for that. That was very insightful, Tim.
Yes.
Very clear differences between countries there. So I would move over now to Mandy. Mandy, do you want to just share your ideas on the
And I would like to just say that actually, because obviously I do a lot of work with women and trying to get women in, to sort of become entrepreneurs. And one of the things that we have seen through the pandemic And it's been women that have been really hit hard in the last 18 months. So like some of the small businesses, restaurants, beauty, and those sort of things that we're talking about. And women now are not prepared to take some of those risks, or they've used their money to sort of survive for the last 18 months. And when young people and women are now trying to come back up with a new idea, sometimes they're really kind of not always given those opportunities. So I've seen that, whether that's in the UK or whether that's in the US or wherever else you may be. We've also seen through the World Economic Forum, they did some research and data, not just about entrepreneur, but they were talking about salary, and women, you know, have gone back 36 years. Women were already 200 years plus behind men to be paid equal to men. So I think, you know, we need to level up. We need to level up that playing field and make sure that young people get the access to the same finance, that women get the same opportunities. And Tim, and I really like the point that you make, and one thing that I really talk about is actually building our social network, our social capital, and my black book. So it comes down to the people that you know, and where I can access things. So when I look at my nieces and nephews and people that I mentor and support, one of the reasons they get access to a lot of resources and connections is because of myself. And if those young people were trying to navigate or play on that level playing field, it certainly isn't level, whether it's in America or the UK or wherever else in the global south as well. And we have seen that, you know, it's going to take years now for people to come back. And as we talk about the global reset, we've got to make sure that we leave no one behind. And when I talk about that, that means, you know, women and the next generation, because actually, you know, if you had money before the pandemic and you're, you know, you've lost a few £1,000, you're going to just write it off. But a lot of people, like a startup like Seven or somebody like that, can't afford to take a £20,000, £30,000 hit. So that was all I would say, really.
Thank you, Mandy.
Okay. So now we move over to Dr. Louisa to please just share your thoughts on this.
Well, there is not much to add now that everybody has gone through the round table, but I agree with Rebecca very much that for me, the big issue is financial education. I mean, this is for me is fundamental. There is a lot of people that want to start a business and they have a lot of energy and they are very optimistic, but then they get caught in very basic stuff because they didn't receive any financial education. So I think that's very, very important. And when I mean financial education, I mean very basic. And so for me, the best way to help on this point would be to introduce this financial education very early on for children when they are just learning math. And sometimes you are doing exercises about the train going from station A to station B. What about if we do, okay, we have a company, or not a company, a kiosk, or you are doing something, you are selling something and it costs this to produce, just basic P&L analysis so people can understand the cash flow, the losses, what does it mean to, you know, cover your expenses, this type of things. And I think it should be started with the children. And then from there is the cultural element, of course. And I think for what I have been looking at, there are two things very relevant. One is the fear of failure, and then the attitude toward risk. And so in countries where the fear of failure is very high, and this happening in countries like Spain and France, and less, very much less, very different in Nordic countries or in the US. So if fear of failure is low, then people are more willing to take risk, so very much related as well. And then therefore they are more willing to approach different sources of financing, they are more creative on looking for funding and so on. So everything, the cultural element is there, I totally agree, but I think that the financial education is something that needs to be improve, and from there everybody will be in, at least we are leveling the playing field a little, and that's, I don't want to get into details of venture capital because it was already very much covered. That's on my side.
All right, thanks for that, Dr. Louisa. And one of the things why I think that was very important is because Dr. Louisa has this book on entrepreneurial finance that really breaks things down. So thanks for that, Dr. Louisa. We'll move over now to Seven. Seven, do you want to just share your thoughts on this?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for that. One of the major thing with this that I wanted to share is really relevant to what Tim has shared with us, actually, talking about context. there's a story that I love to tell where I was introduced for the first time. This would have been maybe several months ago now, about how abnormal entrepreneurship is. And we use the word abnormal, like, what does that mean? I was speaking to someone on a podcast that I run. He's a therapist for entrepreneurs. And one of the things he needs to support people with is just how much stress comes with entrepreneurship because it's so abnormal. And he was telling me about almost the understanding of how normal or not normal, how weird entrepreneurship is, what kind of an effect that starts to have. So I started to think about, well, what does normal mean? And obviously normal is whatever your norm is and wherever you are living or you've grown or etc. One of the something I find really funny, one of the practitioners who has developed a resource for us at Starter Hub, he's a marketing leader for the last 20 or so years. He's living in the US now, but he spent a lot of his life living in Hong Kong. And so we're here in Europe thinking, well, America's a lot more entrepreneurial than we are. It's kind of the general feeling, it feels like. But he said to me, when he got back to America, Hong Kong is so much more entrepreneurial than America. It feels so strange being here. And so I was like, wow, really? And I started to think about why that is. Now, it's not always healthy that it's the case, but in Hong Kong, there's very much a culture of working very hard, a very strong work ethic. But there's also things like innovation. Innovation is a bit more common, whereas at least to me in the UK, it feels like we only really use the word innovation when we're talking about like a specific program or a company that has like an innovation team. They're going to be a bigger company with more money to spend. We don't really think about these things. So entrepreneurship is going to be a lot weirder, a lot less normal for us. But something I think that's really empowering, and the reason why I wanted to share this, thinking about optimism and pessimism, is because of that, your environment, the environment that you have that allows for your knowledge, your skills, the kind of mindset you'll have, if that's going to have that much of an impact on you, in a way that's kind of empowering to me, because it means that we can create that environment for ourselves. Now, it might be harder depending on what circumstances you're in, but you are able to create an environment for yourself in which you are more likely to succeed. Hence why when Tim was saying, well, actually access to finance really is there if you know where to look and how to utilize your networks, that really spoke to me, because that for a lot of us as a young entrepreneur and a lot of young entrepreneurs in my network, it feels like it's that knowledge and that mindset that's really in our way more than anything else. So I hope that's a little bit helpful.
Thanks, Seven.
Great. Thanks for that, Seven. And I can see someone in the chat is really thinking along the same lines with you, Seven, thinking about how it's all about your mindset, and that really helps you get access to finance. We move now finally to Johan to get your thoughts on this access to finance topic.
Very good. From my aspect, I think finance is not only about venture capital money, but I think it starts much before that with much smaller amounts for creating your MVP or whatever. And I think that there are quite some differences, of course, very much dependent on the cultural difference between the US and Europe in particular, as that's the topic of today here. I think in US, the attitude and mentality is, of course, a lot more related to you have to risk it to get the biscuit, right? So I agree with a lot of the comments there. It's about the attitude and the mentality. And I think Europe needs to change a little bit further. And I think we've seen a very strong development of course, both the US over time, but also China in more recent times. And right now, to my experience, it looks like Europe is squeezed between the US and China. And we will need to look at how can we change the attitude and mentality also through potentially governmental changing the tax situation and being more stimulating of the risk taking and so on there. I think it's also important we start supporting entrepreneurs then with small amounts so that they have a chance of really creating something with a small investment. And if they succeed, we should provide more support to them. I think the concentration of both power and opportunity today is very big, and yeah, we have to turn it around a little bit further, I think, in Europe. From my perspective, I'm the founder of NACCE, and we've already from the beginning committed that we will give back at least 51% of our profit into the NACCE community in very small amounts to really get more people started and eventually become successful entrepreneurs. So that's my 5 cents there, but I think it's been very interesting to hear the comments of the other panelists also here.
Great, thanks for that, Johan. And just to also mention that Dr. Carbin's NACCE, they also have this Everyday Venture Fund that also does something very similar to what you are doing at NACCE. And it's really, really nice to see all this support financially going to entrepreneurship. So thank you very much for that. And so we move now to the next line. This is just about gender and its implication for finance. We're not going to spend too much time on this because some of our panelists have talked about this briefly. So Dr. Mohammed, please.
Yeah. So can we go for question number 3, Winfried? Is that right?
Okay. No, before we move there, can we just...
So, okay, we'll go for the part of, do you think access to finance is affected by the gender differences between male and female?
Yeah, we start there with Dr. Carbin, please.
Well, first of all, I love what all of you said. No one has ever accused me of being normal. So I probably need to access your therapist, but I can say what I picked up from the first part really are the differences. I agree with what people said. I think in the US, people tend to be overly optimistic somehow. And we see that on Shark Tank. And that's a whole other roundtable. But I want to respond directly to this question about differences. And if you don't mind, I'd like to expand even beyond women to include other under-resourced populations. In the United States, we have a veteran population. And I learned yesterday, a lot of veterans, particularly women veterans, if you ask them, are you a veteran? They don't self-identify that, although they have served in the military. These are often people that don't have access to friends and family money. We have big conversations in the United States about equity as we're having those conversations around the world. And I think there are huge disparities. What I heard that I was really hopeful about hearing conversations is people really focused on how can we provide people around the world with tools, with language, with networks, and that opportunity. Because truly, if you think about each of us on the call, regardless of our experience, we have experienced privilege in our life. Not that we haven't had difficulty, but we see here in the US, even through the pandemic, there's a huge divide. If you look, Silicon Valley was mentioned. There's other pockets around the United States, New York, Chicago, what you generally think about. A lot of people that are wealthy in the United States that had thriving businesses, the entrepreneurs, they became immensely wealthier. And you had a population of women, of people who are under-resourced that were really hurt by the pandemic. So I think there's a lot to unpack there, but I'm really glad that you asked this question, and I can't wait, Winifred, to see what your other panelists have to chime in with.
Oh, great. Thanks for that, Dr. Carbin. Now we move over to Tim. Tim, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Winifred. Yes, thank you. I don't want to say too much about the raised money side. I talked about that, and others commented. But I do think that there is, again, a bit of an issue here that we need to be conscious of, partly when we design programs or we design support structures. So a colleague of mine many years ago, or not that many years ago, but a number of colleagues, an academic colleague, did a series of surveys. Now, this was not a big enough population to be truly seen as a scientific survey, but it was interesting because he was asking a series of his entrepreneurship students in classes over several years how they were wanted to receive mentorship. We're going to talk about mentorship more generally, its value in a minute. But it was interesting that the traditional way in which people offered mentoring to potential entrepreneurs was very much a kind of one-on-one relationship, right? It was quite a secretive thing, you know, so that the mentee could feel safe and open up. But actually, it turned out that the majority of women in groups and in his entrepreneurship classes wanted group mentoring, which was not something that his program offered. And actually, they wanted lateral support from their peers as much as they wanted it from supposedly the senior voice in the room. Now, I'm not trying to put too much weight on this or replace one set of stereotypes with another, which I think is very easy to do. But I do think that there is what I think I really take from that is the need to think of what we would say in the UK as courses for horses. You know, not every runner in the entrepreneurship race wants to run the same distance or be treated in the same way or work in the same way. And so you have to change the courses or the programs that you offer for the types of diversity that we find. And that might be ethnic diversity, racial diversity, background, understanding, as well as gender, and indeed neurodiversity. And I think that variation in the entrepreneurial system is therefore a plus, but it's a plus not only in terms of what people do and the way that they act and develop, but in terms of the things that we consciously do to provide that. The sources of finance, the accelerators, the incubators, the training programs, the education programs. And we need to make sure that we are not always working towards an idea of what is best. There is a real danger if you follow the kind of almost cult-like status of some of the ideas around what happens with startups. You know, every time there's a new theory of what the startup way or whatever it might be, that this is the methodology that we can all follow and we'll magically, like a new diet fad, we'll all magically become entrepreneurs. Actually, it's much more complex than that. And many of these are ideas where you pick the best ones wherever you can find them. And that includes working out how we provide a varied background so that whatever people are like, they can find the support that works for them.
Great, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Tim. So we can see Safer in the chat says he agrees with what fits, it's practical. Practical is really the way to go. So thanks for that, Tim. We now move over to Mandy. Mandy, do you want to share your thoughts on gender and how that affects access to finance?
So I was going to look at some cultural side of it, and I'm glad that Tim just mentioned that as well, because I was talking to some women in Canada recently from the South Asian community, and they were trying to rebuild back, you know, a business. And it was quite interesting for me to hear this, because actually they were looking at family and other friends to sponsor them and support them to help them to kind of restart a business. And they had a really great idea. And it was really quite shocking, because 3 out of 7 women think that actually they were disencouraged by their family members to sort of say, oh, you know, what are you going to do that for? You need to look at this. It's not the right time to do this right now. You could lose all this money. And said her brother came up, it wasn't as offered, and actually everyone was sort of ready to kind of fund that. So I'm seeing that over the years within my own community, and I've also seen how young people are struggling to navigate, trying to find a mentor as well at the moment. And there are great resources online, and I think because this event is great, because it's kind of bringing people. We need to support women who kind of deal with imposter syndrome sometimes, and I think a lot of my male friends, you know, have a lot more confidence, a lot more assertive, willing to take risk. And I think that we have to the next generation of campaigners and entrepreneurs. We need to sort of like challenge the norms that we are kind of conditioning our children. So I think that's the point that I would like to make.
All right, thanks a lot for that, Mandy. Thank you. Now we'll move over to Dr. Louisa, please.
Thank you. So, well, I just want to go back to what I know from research on the topic and the things that I have learned from my colleagues on this. One of the things, I was in a dissertation committee I was looking at women entrepreneurs in general. And one of the things that women, and I think this point was raised before, women in general, they don't want to build huge companies. They prefer to build smaller companies, and therefore they ask for less money. So that means that also sometimes that they don't even ask for money, they have savings, so that the aspects to finance sometimes is also related to what you want. I think it was Tim mentioning that. So that's one point. The other 2 points I want to make are from research. I have a colleague in London Business School, Dana Kansi, and she has been looking at the different questions that investors pose to women and men founders. And what she has found out is very interesting, and she has studied psychology and this type of things. And she has found out is that the questions that the investors ask to women are what they are called prevention questions. So they are always asking questions like, what are you going to do to avoid failing here? What are you going to do if you don't get this? So always is like a negative type of question where you have to solve a problem. While the questions they ask to men are more what they are called promotion type of questions is, so how can you grow 10% next year? How are you going to make it to go to the US? So it's just a positive, you're talking in an optimistic way when you are asking questions to men, and in more negative way already to women. So that also puts a little bit of a challenge there. And although 30%, I think it's around 33% of the ventures started in the UK are from women, only 1% of the venture capital goes to women. And then the final point also from the same colleague, very interesting, is that they have found during this research that she has been doing that also there is an investor penalize women for the type of industry where they are in. So women have to be in industries that are associated with women. So if women come from industries that are things related to babies or fashion, or these days femtech is very much on fashion as well, then this is good for the investors. Now, if you have a woman coming with something related to AI or fintech, this is not so women, and so they don't like it so much. Now, it's very interesting because on the other side for men, there is no penalty. So if men start a company which is supposed to be more women type of company, there is no penalty. So they only penalize female founders if they are not in what they call industry fit. And with that, I'm gonna stop it there.
Thanks for that, Dr. Louisa. I follow a lot of the research done by Dr. Kanze. I've attended a workshop that she presented her work in, and it's very interesting, these insights that she has shared. So now we'll move over to Seven. Do you want to share your thoughts on this gender issue?
Sure. Well, thank you for a lot of those insights. A lot of those things were new facts to me, and I hadn't heard them before. And I unfortunately don't have much I feel like I can add to this, but there is one thought I wanted to share. This is coming from the perspectives of a lot of my female peers, colleagues, and even friends. And a lot of what we're seeing, and this has happened or increased, I should say, because of the pandemic, we're seeing a lot of online content from small business people, particularly on apps like Instagram and TikTok. We're seeing a lot of female founders, female business owners, small business owners, entrepreneurs sharing their stories of growth, of success, of changing their lives, of changing other people's lives. And that's been a really empowering thing for these peers of mine. And I've had that expressed to me a number of times, and I've seen those, scrolling through, I've seen those posts myself and gone, this is empowering for me, And so I guess what the one thought I wanted to share was that although we clearly have some very, very difficult and wide gaps to bridge, there you go, that's what I'm trying to say. Although there's a lot of work that needs to be done, sharing stories of success like this and hearing from people like Mandy. Mandy, you shared a couple things that were really empowering to me, and we've spoken before, and you did the same thing then. Those kinds of things can be really powerful tools to help bridge the gap. And I would encourage anyone watching, as well as obviously our panelists already doing this, to also be that person yourself, be the person who empowers others, who passes on your story, your learnings, things like that. Hopefully that can help bridge the gap a little bit.
All right, great. Thanks for that. We'll just round up quickly with Johan, please.
I think for sure access to finance is affected by a lot of different aspects, and gender is of course one, but there's a lot of other types of inequality also. And I think the SDG 5, which is about equality, is a really critical element to the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And I think it's time to talk about not just, for instance, America first and so on, but I would rather want to talk about entrepreneurship first. I think we have really, really huge opportunities, and we need to look at finding and creating those opportunities for entrepreneurs, no matter gender or religion or nationality or field of interest, right? To me, it feels almost like we need sort of like a union for the entrepreneurs to make our voice heard. Entrepreneurship, clearly, I believe, is the backbone of every nation's economy. And we need to make sure that our voices gets heard and gets the support that we need, especially in these times when there's so much change needed, and hopefully starting to happen even more going forward in a positive way for entrepreneurship. So yeah, that's my view.
All right, great. So just keeping an eye on the time, we're just going to jump quickly into question 2. Before we do that, in the question 2, we're looking at mentorship and whether that does make any difference in people's entrepreneurship journey. We have a question there on your screens. You can just pop in the answers so that we know. Okay. All right. Wow. So we see quite a few people. We have 69% of our attendees have had a mentor and 31% haven't had. So great. Great. That just gives us an insight on the direction for this. So we see that mentorship is becoming quite popular. I myself, I mentor entrepreneurs within the NASDAQ Mentor Makers and founders and mentors here in the UK. So it is something that is becoming popular. We just want to get your thoughts on, do you think it does make any difference in people's entrepreneurship journey if they have any mentors or not? So we start with you, Dr. Corbin. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the poll was interesting. I think it bears out what we see in the research, and what we see really on the ground is it makes a really big difference if people can have a mentor, and that can be loosely defined. We've talked about on this roundtable how entrepreneurship itself can span from a Silicon Valley high-tech business to a barbershop. So it's a wide swath. But I think what we are focused on here in the United States, we have a new administration in Washington, D.C. We've been privileged to be on a number of calls with the Small Business Administration, is this agenda of Build Back Better. And I feel the hopefulness from global colleagues, but I think a key part of the success of what we see in our hundreds of colleges is businesses that start up. We've had a record number of startups in the United States. How can we keep them from failing? And we know part of the entrepreneurship journey might include failure. Maybe the first venture that you have doesn't succeed, but how do you keep on going? How do you pivot? How do you persist? How do you get access to those financial tools? And many of the things that Luisa brought up along with other people show that, you know, women, maybe their aspirations aren't as big as they need to be, or maybe they could be bigger, or maybe they could be exposed to a franchise model. So I would just say, I think mentorship in business and education, truly in every aspect of life, is critically important. We see that in the data, and we hear it in the stories. And I think that's the point that resonates with me.
It's great, it's great. So thanks for that, Dr. Corbin. We'll move over now to Tim. Tim, do you want to just tell us what you think about this?
So I think that in general, the mentors can be invaluable. At least that's the expectation. What isn't probably always clear is who is the right kind of mentor and what is the right kind of mentor. It's not automatically somebody who has had success in the same field that you're about. And it's not automatically somebody who's older or somebody who's achieved X or Y. There are a variety of different types of mentors, and like other things that we've been discussing, a lot of this really needs to depend on what it is that you're facing and the kind of personality that you are, and somebody you can respond to, the kind of person that you might be able to trust and open up to. I've run programs in the past where I've deliberately tried to assign people multiple mentors so that they can, almost like a speed dating thing, and they'll tend to stick with one or other, but it won't necessarily be the ones that you expect. It'll just be somewhere where, like going on a date, there's a bit of a click. And sometimes opposites attract, and sometimes you have to have a certain amount of similarity. So it's a difficult thing to necessarily do. I find the interesting thing, and I'm interested by the poll results and the number of people who say they've consciously got a new mentor, because actually I think this has gone on for generations, but we just didn't always talk about it like this, right? There used to be the you know, in hierarchies within large organizations and companies, there would be somebody you might, you know, who's been around a bit, who might take you under their wing and take you out for a drink occasionally and just ask how you're getting on and have you thought about doing this, and, you know, whatever else it is that you might do. And I think mentoring in different forms has been, you know, is as old as, it's a sort of an extension of parenting. It's as old as we are, but it isn't necessarily something that we've given such conscious thought to. So I think the process is not new. The way that we talk about it is newish, but yes, it's absolutely and unquestionably beneficial.
Great, thanks for that, Tim. We'll now move over to Mandy. Mandy, what do you think about
Brilliant,
this?
thank you. So, I mean, I do a lot of mentoring, and it's something that I'm really passionate about, but actually I don't just believe in mentoring, but actually also believe in being a sponsor. It's about creating real opportunities and actually giving people the real tools to kind of follow their dreams and really make an impact. So, I mean, when I mean about a sponsor, it's about bringing somebody to the table and really giving them the opportunity to showcase their talent and be given the skills to share your network. And I also believe in like paying it forward, because one of the things that I have seen, I've met awful mentors as well who are in it for the money and they're not in it for the right reason. And the amount of people that reach out to me on LinkedIn to say, oh, can I sort out your life? And I'm thinking, okay, and what are you going to offer me? And then it's like, oh, Mandy, but how can I get speaking opportunities and be paid for it? And then I look at it and think, hang on, you haven't quite got your own life sorted, but you want to correct mine. So I always say to people, please be careful. Please do some background checks. Please check out, because actually, sadly, there's a lot more charlatans out there, and especially on social media. So many people can make themselves come across as being an influencer or whatever else, and people can Photoshop themselves and do whatever. And actually, I always say to people, look at the recommendations, look at other things, and please do your homework, do your checks. And it's great to find a mentor. It's great to find somebody who's willing to support you and open doors for you. But I do generally really believe that I would say to you, really do some checks, look at it, because there are people charging people thousands of pounds and people are not getting the results that they were hoping for. And, you know, and I just wanted to make that point. So thank you.
All right, thanks. Those were really nice insights there, Mandy. We'll move over now to Dr. Louisa to please tell us what you think.
Nothing to add. I think it has been all said already, and I think because we have a lot of other questions coming, I just agree with what has been said, so I pass on this one.
Okay. And so, Johan, Seven, any points to share so that we move on to the next line of questioning?
Sure. I mean, there were a couple of quick things I thought would be kind of interesting to add to this. To me, I take a slightly different perspective to this because mentorship's really been really important to my career. There is a study that I've been kind of looking back at a lot recently that essentially listed a lot of the reasons for failure, right? And the biggest one by far was there's actually no need for the product that the startup was creating. And there are a lot of other ones underneath them. Finance is one of them, marketing plans, wrong team, those are all reasons on there. And to me, a mentor, someone who's been around the block, someone who knows a thing or two about why things have succeeded and why not, can help you avoid those issues, those top issues, so many, if not all of those top issues, and not just avoid making them, but also do the right thing. Right? Saying I believe something like 70% more likely to succeed. Citation needed on that, but much more likely to succeed if you've had a mentor compared to entrepreneurs who haven't. And on Mandy's point there, if someone is charging you for mentoring, it probably, I'd argue, they're not really a mentor. They're probably more of a coach, someone who's running a business in that way. Whereas a mentor really should be someone who believes in you as well as what you're trying to do so much that they really want you to succeed. And that, to me, that's a really, really important part when looking for mentors.
All right, great for that, Seven. Johan, anything to add on here?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of very good comments from my fellow panelists, for sure. I would just say that nobody is an expert on everything, and nobody has enough time to do everything by themselves. Hence, I think it's extremely critical to surround yourself with great people, and that includes mentors, right? Entrepreneurship is a journey, and a mentor should be, if it's a good one, he should be like a guide to you, right? Somebody who has an expertise related to where you want to go. But I definitely agree with the previous speakers. There has to be a great fit, and I think one of the starting points there is that the entrepreneur is open to assistance in the first place. It's very hard to assist somebody who is not open to it. So like the previous questions and subjects here, I think it very much comes down to attitude and mentality. And yeah, we have great opportunities, but we need to nurture them and move forward.
All right, thanks a lot for that, Johan. Very inspirational there. We move now to the third question, which looks at access to entrepreneurship education. We have a question there just to engage with our attendees. So we'll just give that a few seconds and then we'll look at the answers. So we see that based on what I have on my screen, 40% of the attendees thinks USA ranks highest, followed by the UK, and then followed by Sweden, and then Poland, and then Spain. So Spain and Poland come in the same place. If we look at the GEM data, actually, it's the USA that ranks the highest. So most people, if you've chosen USA, you've gotten that one right. So now we move to Dr. Mohammed to start the line of questioning for this topic, please.
Okay, we already, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we already discussed some of these questions, but I would like to make it clear in order to increase our discussion, the depth of our discussion. My third question will be focused on what are the main expectations to increase the quality of entrepreneurship education. Thank you.
All right, so we start with Dr. Corbin. Dr. Corbin, your organization focuses on community college entrepreneurship. So we think you would have a lot to tell us about this one.
Thank you. That's a great question. And for those who might be joining us from around the world, the concept of community college is a bit different than college or university, because they have in the United States about 1,100 of these institutions that sit really at the nexus of urban and rural communities everywhere. Part of their mission is to serve the community. So in essence, they have sort of threaded throughout them an entrepreneurial mission, whether it's social entrepreneurship like we've been talking about, or Main Street entrepreneurship, or high-tech entrepreneurship. And I think access is key. There's a notion here in the United States about open access. So, typically to get into a university, you have to score at a certain level, you have to have a GPA. It might be interesting for people to know that we do have a segment of community college students that begin their college studies in high school. We have some that come without even a high school diploma, that they get remedial courses and they get back on track. There's a whole other segment that come through on the skilled trades, which is, maybe what people are more focused on in a vocational opportunity. But what we believe at NACCE and what we've seen work through the data and through lots of case examples is, if you embed entrepreneurial mindset and principles in a cross-disciplinary fashion, so that means it resides in the business and engineering school along with art and history. If you teach people that they have a sense of agency, and if they're creating something, whether it's art or poetry or music, how might they use entrepreneurship to turn that into something that can sustain their lives, whether it's through the gig economy or starting a business, or maybe it's joining a business, as somebody on the panel said, being an intrapreneur, which means that I work for NACCE. So NACCE is not my business, but I run it like an entrepreneur, and I try to apply those principles. So great question. And I can't wait to see what other people have their thoughts about this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Combin. That was very insightful. We'll move over now to Tim. Tim, do you want to tell us what you think about this?
So I'm just trying to think this through and respond to Mohammed's challenge a little bit about what makes entrepreneurship education better potentially. I think that there are several things. So when we started, about 15, 16 years ago, we started the first postgraduate program, master's program in technology entrepreneurship in Europe, and at the time it was seen as quite a revolutionary thing to do. And actually, we spent much of the first couple of years trying to convince people you could even teach entrepreneurship. We spent years just answering the question, can you teach it? Are entrepreneurs born or are they made? And I think it is now widely understood, or perhaps not totally agreed with, but the idea that that whether or not they're born or made, you can certainly help them to learn faster, fail faster, grow bigger, grow better. And so in that sense, it's very much, I still think, considered and applied and taught as almost like a professional level work, particularly within formal education structures. I think that there is, however, and here I might sound really old-fashioned and out of touch, and that's possibly true, but I'm going to risk going against the zeitgeist for a moment. I think that there is a problem for many entrepreneurs who approach this and say formal education around entrepreneurship is bad because it's not fast enough, and I want to know what I need to know today so I can apply it, and I can go on and I can do something, and then I can go and do the next thing. And actually, the problem is when you start out in something new, you don't know what you don't know. And I'm going to try and avoid sounding like Rumsfeld, but there's a huge series of problems here about about the unknowns, and you actually need some structure to navigate a topic for the first time, and you need what in a book would be a narrative arc, right? You need somebody who will take you through, who knows what the end point is, and will roughly stage gate you there. And actually, if you don't, and if you can follow that, then great. There are plenty of things that you will learn that after that you can add to. But to start with, you need a scaffolding that will take you through some of the basics and enable you to understand what's there. I mean, if you go to an entrepreneur of the sort we were talking about earlier, the kind of VC funding entrepreneur, and the first question, do we think there's enough funding out there? The answer is yes. So why do entrepreneurs come back and continually complain there's not enough funding? Well, actually, it's because they can't raise money. Why can't they raise money? Well, because somebody needs to tell them that their pitch is terrible, or actually their idea is rubbish, right? So quite often, the entrepreneurs saying this is what we need actually isn't a very good diagnosis of the problem. And entrepreneurs don't always know what's there because they haven't been through it, or because they haven't seen it, or because they don't have that breadth and that landscape. So I think there's a huge amount of positive outcomes that can be found in structured programs, and programs that take time, therefore, to go through, to take people to the basis of entrepreneurship. And yes, they are practitioner heavy, and I think that's okay. Much like it would be in law or in many other practitioner-led fields. There's a healthy tension between the practitioner and the academic, but there's definitely a thing that you can learn from that. And just thinking that you can get all of this from YouTube videos and from the 1,001 apps that are out there that will teach you to write a business plan, I mean, forget it. The only people who are making money out of that are the people who are selling it, because you ain't.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Tim. We'll just quickly move over now to Mandy to tell us what you think about.
So, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. I think in school, I think, when we kind of have young people who want to become in to be an entrepreneur, and is not for academia, is not for everybody. And we need to be looking at, different ways for young people to get involved, and not just apprenticeships. But I know like the Princess Trust works for young people in the UK, and there are organizations like that to help young people. But I think that we need to talk about resilience and teach people that, think about setbacks and not take them always personal, and about letting go of fear. And sometimes people hold on to a setback for such a long time that they don't have those kind of skills that I would say that, you know, will help you through life, because actually sometimes things will happen in our life that shouldn't happen, but actually it's just about learning from them and actually moving forward. Because actually, if you speak to any entrepreneur, nobody's had a sort of a plain journey that, you know, you've kind of sailed in and everything's worked out for you. It hasn't. It's a lot of risk taking, it's gambling a lot, it's, you know, a lot of hard work to get to where you do. And I just wanted to make those points. And I think it's about teaching young people and the next generation of entrepreneurs those kind of real life skills that will help them as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Mandy. And it's very similar to what Dr. Kerben is saying, trying to embed these entrepreneurial skills into any field of education. So thanks for that. We now want to get your thoughts, Dr. Louisa, on this entrepreneurship education discussion.
So very similar to what Mandy and Rebecca had said already. I was, some years, it was like 10 years ago already, I was in charge of doing a study of how we could improve entrepreneurship in Spain. And we look at first what were the factors that were basically not allowing entrepreneurship. And there were several factors. One was the administrative factor, so how difficult it is to start businesses. Then there was the educational factor, so people ready, that they were ready to start businesses. There was the financing, and then was the culture. And so basically the administrative factors, after we talk to several entrepreneurs, they will say, look, it doesn't matter if it takes a month to set up a business. If we want to set up a business, we'll do it. So basically that was out. The financing, as we discussed before, is more about having the knowledge. And if there are good projects, the money will come. So it's out. And then you're left with culture. So the culture of the country, which in Spain is very much against entrepreneurship, and education. And the only way you can change culture is through education. So you end up with education being the number 1 factor. And so what we did with that, and this was with a foundation from the Spanish royal family, was to start a program, a project that is still going on. So it has been going on now for 10 years, for a decade, to teach teachers in schools across the country how could they develop in the classroom the entrepreneurial mindset. But not like a course of entrepreneurship, but so how do you teach, I don't know, again, mathematics or geography, and do projects or activities that encourage the children to take risks, to be creative, to be optimistic, to believe that they can do it. So this internal control, that things depend on you. So the entrepreneurial mindset that we were talking about. And that, well, we haven't go back to get actual data, but we can see that the effect is very positive already. But of course, we need 2 or 3 decades to see if the culture or the effect of this intervention is having a positive effect. But I'm very happy to see that the program is still going on in my home country.
Nice for that, Dr. Louisa, to see how your work is advancing entrepreneurship education. So now, Seven, any thoughts of this? So Seven, you have this starter hub that focuses on providing educational training, not training, but materials as well for entrepreneurs. How do you think, this can help entrepreneurship education?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of what's been said on this so far makes me really happy to hear, because there are a lot of elements to this. And Winifred, stop me if I start taking too long, but I'll try to be brief. This is something that's incredibly important to me. Now, something I want to highlight before I get into it is in the kind of full question that was originally sent to us, what we're looking at is something along the lines of, is there enough, or is it good enough, the entrepreneurial education in college and university? But then in the full question that was after that, which I believe might be based on the GEM data, you can correct me later if I'm wrong, is something along the lines of, what is access to entrepreneurial education post-school? And post-school is different to in university and college. Now, the reason this is really important to me is because from the perspective of the UK, the career progression for young people in the UK is very rigid and linear, where it's expected that university will be your next option will be your next step, sorry, after school, even if there are so many other options for you. But if we think about what universities are set up to do, they're academic institutions, and academics need something that's very different to what entrepreneurs need. Now, something Tim said that I love is that entrepreneurs often need a lot of support, but to me what's important is that education is different, and we don't put enough weight on that. Here in the UK, there are a couple of universities, I say a couple, there are a few universities that do that support really well, but there are a lot where I've spoken to students personally who have said, actually, this support hasn't been that great. A lot of the universities that don't have the funding to put or create great programs, their students don't feel like they've been very well supported or that they're very well prepared. So to me, and then of course, there's also the question of what if you're not in a university? What if you choose a different path? Where is the access to education for you? And so to me, increasing access to entrepreneurial education is incredibly important. That's kind of that to me is the difference between whether you're likely to be successful or whether you're likely to be the kind of person that Tim described, where you constantly think something external is the problem, and actually it's your own education that might be holding you back. So to me, it's just been incredibly empowering to hear that these perspectives are out there, and we understand actually we need more options for people, as well as more of an understanding that that's the kind of path that we need to promote.
All right, great. Thanks for that. Seven, we'll now move over to Johan. Any final thoughts, and then we'll wrap up.
I think there's big shifts happening in society in total, right? And the way we see it, then we're clearly entering a new era of project-based learning and different types of employment, freelancing, gig economy, and so on. And it clearly looks like the big organizations will hire less full-time employees going forward. So it's not going to be so much about getting a job, but more about creating a job and getting the education for being able to do so, right? So we very clearly see the trend of entrepreneurship being the future of work. So I think the question is about, is the educational system built for training future good entrepreneurs? And I'm not at this point fully sure that they understand the situation and what is needed, neither from the educational institute perspective, but also not completely from the students or even society at large. So I think, again, we need to simply have a discussion regarding a slightly changed mentality and attitude towards work in total. And I think we need to have a society that is more supportive of entrepreneurship. So we need to, I think, need to have educators with a solid entrepreneurial experience. And we clearly need to get more visionary leaders in terms of guiding society and the young generation even clearer in the change of going from maybe industrial revolutions to service revolutions, right? So yeah, it's very, very important. And I think we have a long way still to go with making sure that we can create more successful entrepreneurs everywhere.
Great. Thanks for that, Johan. So just to quickly wrap up the event, we have this final line of discussion. We're not going to spend too long. We're skipping the poll as well. We just move on to internationalization and expanding. And with this, we're really focusing on the ease of doing business, ease of starting business, and regulations within Europe, the USA, and just generally. So recently I've been doing some research on just the ease of starting business, and based on some data I was able to draw from the United Statistics Census Bureau in the USA, I found out that once I did the calculation, 509 businesses were started per hour in the USA, which is huge. And now when you move over to the UK, you look at data from the Companies House, you see that 93 businesses were started hourly, were registered hourly. And now when you look at the EU 27 countries, on average, you're seeing 34 businesses being registered per hour. Now, if we look at the UK as a case study, we see that even though 93 businesses are registered per hour, 51 are dissolved per hour. So you're having a net effect of 43 businesses. So it's not really a case of how easy is it to register and start the business. It's more of what is the business environment like? What is the support like? And we've looked at the access to finance. We've looked at entrepreneurship education. We've seen mentorship. These are things that make entrepreneurship process a bit easier. So I think if you just want to share your final thoughts on your specific countries and whether do you think there's the right environment for entrepreneurship to thrive at the moment? So we start with you again, Dr. Corbin, please.
Yes, thank you. And I'll try to be brief. I mentioned before there's been a record number of startups in the United States that hasn't happened for decades. Largely out of the pandemic, people's jobs have been displaced. And I think there's a real opportunity, the way that states are organized here in the United States, to have the ease of access of opening businesses, have connectivity to mentorship, but importantly, have support through both colleges and universities for businesses that are started, so that your net, what you spoke about, Winifred, your net is higher. So there are more that are started. We see that in North Carolina. We look to the leadership here of our Secretary of State, Elaine Marshall, who has dedicated herself to doing that. I'd like to see that replicated throughout the United States.
All right, great. Thanks for that, Dr. Corbin. Now we move over to Mandy. Mandy, any ideas on how, what you think the business environment in the UK is like and how that can help?
So I just think, everyone's made some really good points through the whole thing here. Sorry, my camera's gone funny. I just wanted to just say that, we talked about mentorship, we talked about sponsorship, but I also think that, governments now need to be looking at supporting the class of 2020-21. We need to be looking at, getting finance to young people and people that want to become entrepreneurs. And actually, it's got to be a part of the offer, because academia is not for everybody. That's all I would like to say. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks for that, Mandy. Yeah, we move over to Dr. Louisa. Dr. Louisa, please. Yeah.
I think there was somebody trying to say something.
No, it's okay. We are waiting for you, Dr. Louisa.
I think we're running out of time. Maybe we can take some questions from the audience as well.
Yes,
so
please. Yeah, after your thoughts, if you have got any.
No, I let my colleagues if they want. I prefer to let also the audience.
Okay, thank you for your sensible actions. Okay, I think we already did answer some of the participants' question on the chat. And Natalie, did you pick up any pressing question from the chat?
No, as we were going, as you rightfully said, we addressed them, and there are really insightful comments. We are going to turn them into some follow-up emails. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. And Winifred, back to you. Let's wrap up.
Yeah, I think that's it. We have come to the end of the event. Like Natalia said, we didn't have too much questions. It was mostly comments. So I think if does anyone have any question from the audience there? And then we can just wrap up and just do some final remarks. Questions? So we'll just call on Dr. Rebecca to please give us some final remarks, and then we'll round up for the evening.
Okay, I'll be super brief, but I want to direct your attention to a bowl of lemons that's on my desk. And I think what we all need to do, whatever our roles are to lead by example. As all of the esteemed colleagues here are, be audacious, do things like Winifred reached out to me via LinkedIn. I didn't know who she was, but I did my research to find out that she was a very highly esteemed and accomplished person. And I think, as everyone said, don't take failure as the ending, take it as the beginning of something new. So I just want to thank all of you for being here. You can visit my organization, NACCE.com, to learn more about our annual conference, resources and tools that can help you in your work. And I'm grateful for all of you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Dr. Mohammed, any final words? And then we can just quickly wrap up.
No, I just want to say the most heartfelt thank you for everyone for your insightful thoughts and great ideas. I really enjoyed your discussion, and I've got lots of action to do to increase my entrepreneurship education for my students and to do some sort of mentorship for entrepreneurs. So thank you so much for your interesting thoughts and comments and for your time as well. And we are looking forward to see you again in the future events. And we will be informed about the next arrangement by Natalie and Erica as well. Thank you so much, guys. It's very nice to see you.
All right. All right. So thank you. That's a wrap from all of us. We'll have a survey coming to everyone just to get some insights on the events, just three brief questions. So if you can just take out a few minutes to just fill that up, just gives us an insight on what future events would be like. But from me, I'd like to thank everyone that has taken out quite a lot of time this evening to come and join us and listen to us and engage. We can see lovely comments in the chat, and I know that a lot of people have found this very useful. Thank you to the students that have taken out their time, to academics, observers, and everyone. So from me, I remain Winifred Soribe, and thanking you for